Hello, hello, people! The time of the week again where we look at people's work and give some feedback. How's everybody doing? Got a little bit of a change of camera position as well. Hey, Snowbad! Hey, Toritar! Hey, Brandoom! How are we all doing? N is in the chat as well. Even though it's small, I love your little icon, N. No, chatbox is broke again. What is happening with chatbox? No. Oh no, there it is. Oh, just take some time. Okay. Apple's saying hello. Yeah, I'm doing great. Designer Mikita here as well. We've got like a small watch party in our Discord chat as well, which is awesome to see. Thanks so much for joining as well, guys. Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Making a little bit of use of Black Friday, and hopefully we're no longer gonna have issues for those people who were aware. I was basically working on a tablet that was given in like, I don't know, 20% of the time. So whenever you saw me struggling through a live stream, that was probably because my tablet was just giving in and spazzing out. So hopefully with a new one, that's no longer going to be the case. But yeah. With this one, normally we jump straight into like what people want feedback on, right? But what I want to do actually, because I realized that I haven't really done this so far, is I want to look at some of the people's work that don't put themselves up to get feedback, right? So I just want to have like a browse through like our community and check out what people are thinking about doing, and just having a look through the threads. So let's switch it on over, and then we can have a quick look. All right. Yeah, so let's just have a quick look. Because I get glimpses of this, right? But I don't really take the proper time to look into what people have been working on. So I thought, why not do that for a little bit in the beginning of the stream while we wait for people to get in. So we got Antonio participating in the Meat Mat. I think he's thinking about like a Tomb King or something like that. That's pretty cool. Got this interesting looking car that's being built. It's awesome. I love the details on it as well. I'm gonna skip over a couple of ones because they actually wanted to be part of Whip Wednesday, so I'm gonna skip over a couple guys here. Cthulhu Nightmare. I love the look of the concept. Have a look here from Andy Walsh. That's awesome. Very material focused, right? Because there's not too much geometry. I like the framing of it as well. It's an interesting. Hey, McFell! Like a little hideout as well. Let's see. Oh, so like building the layout currently. Yeah, but that seems to be coming along nicely. Oh, that looks awesome. Like a little bit of a forge scene, you know? I'm always a big fan of these like kind of like top-down like environments, like the three-quarter view or whatever you want to call it, right? Like where you just have like a small little section that is just broken apart, and then you can really focus on like the intricate details. This looks great. Love it. I always say like I want to do something like this myself, something small and like achievable in like a short amount of time, but that's whatever I say whenever I start a big project, so it doesn't even matter at this point. Little bit of an update on the Overcooked level. Nice. This is going to be so much fun to work on, just in terms of style. Let's see, Scott is keeping this one up to date. Saw an awesome one in here. Yeah. This AC is looking juicy, man. I like it. So cool. Brucey burgers. BE napalm. Oh my god, you're going full like Easter eggs up in this. I love it. Let's see, making a cottage for my class team. Oh dang, okay. There's like this huge. Is that a tentacle? Vines? Okay, so it's like a massive vine tree. Those are just like mechanical thorns on top of it? Running to render in Blender, okay. It's cool though. Is it called a diorama? I've wanted to do one of those. Oh, you're talking about this guy, right? Yeah, I guess you could call it a diorama. I guess you could. I mean, there's no set definition for it, right? Like a diorama could be just like 3 props together, or it could be something like this. Yeah, I guess it fits the description. All right. That was actually pretty interesting. Like, people are working on like a lot of interesting stuff. So it's gonna be interesting to see where people take all these projects. Let's now jump on over. Let's actually have a look at what the actual people that wanted to get feedback for the stream, right? So now we're jumping into the section where we are gonna look at what people wanted to get feedback on. And we're going to see if we can give them some valuable feedback as well. As always, what I'm going to be doing on my other screen is I'm going to be looking at what people are asking for. So whenever people put up their work on our community, I ask them to ask me for specific points that they want feedback on. So we're starting out with Paula. This was a really interesting project just from the ideation of it. So yeah, I'm excited to see what happened, or like what changed. So let's see. Thank you, Timothy. I really appreciate your feedback. No worries. I've got some time to continue working. Let's see. Right now I'm working on the shader, the huts, and the RGB mask. The screenshots is just some tests, nothing final. Okay. Cool, cool, cool. Yeah, that's nice. Currently, I'm able to blend the base material in 2 more materials and apply additional color information. So the red channel is a destructed version of the base. Okay. Green channel using a dirt, and the blue channel is using color variation like mold. Okay. 2 questions. What would be the appropriate poly count for a hut like the one in the screenshot when using Vertex color paint? Yeah, been using Vertex painting basically, right? So I think actually like the amount of polys that you have here is already like really good. I don't think you're gonna need more, right? When I'm looking for density when it comes to poly count, I'm actually using like even less than you're using right now, I think. I think mine might be even... This would probably be like for Vertex paint, right? Because For base vertex paint, if you want to make that look good, you need like a lot of geometry because it's basically just going to triangulate whatever you're going to add to it, right? But usually what you do on top of it, like you're doing as well, is you add like a mask on top of it, right? That makes it look way better than just like standard vertex painting. So you don't actually need as much vertex paint as you would think you would need. So I would say that this looks okay. Because it's not about the amount of polys, right? It's more, especially when it comes to vertex paint, like it's more about like the density of the polys that we're really looking at. So this might be more dense purely for like a little bit too dense when it comes to purely if we're looking at the vertex paint, right? But it's a rounded object, so you're gonna have that geometry anyway. So I don't think this is bad at all. And then number 2, the second question here is, any ideas on how to best handle the upper parts or like the open-ended planes marked in red? Let's see. I see you got some alpha bits here as well. How to handle, as in like actually make them look good? That's probably... So the way that I would approach this is wherever something is blocked off by like something else, right? You know that you don't need to add too much to the geometry to really sell it. So what you could just do for the base tileable is add a POM to it, right? I think we talked about this before, and I think you might even have that on there already. Yeah, I want to use mesh cards in addition. Yep, that makes sense. What I would do is first pass would be POM to make these sections look good. Right? So this is for number 1. And then for number 2, what I would do is kind of just take your current approach, but just take it further, right? Like actually make it not round, but like at least add like triangles or like squares, right, to the top of it, depending on how close you get, right? But you kind of want to make that look really good. Let me actually... So the way... Right? So I would give it like a little bit of geometry and then really play around with that geometry so that it doesn't like stick up straight, but that you actually have like sticks that kind of bend off, right? And then you could have a section where this doesn't happen too much, and then you have a section where you have like a couple of these guys. A couple of these guys that are just clumped up, but like still in like a formation, right? So I would definitely say first think about like how close you're gonna get. If you're not getting close at all, I think it's fine to keep it as like flat mesh cards, but just have them like spray out a little bit, right? So that we don't have like straight sticks. If you are gonna get close at any point, like this is the way that I would do it. That's for close up, and then once we get at like a distance, if you're only doing like distance shots, right? Come on. Here we go. Or just have them have like, because the whole point is it kind of looks organic, right? That it's not just like tightly woven in, but you actually want to have like some variation in there. So yeah. Add like a couple of segments, like maybe one or two, you know, and then just have them spray out a little bit. Want to use mesh cards in addition. And then what you could do is, like you're already planning on doing, right? Is use these on top of it to maybe add like some little tufts, right? Obviously, this is probably going to be best in this use case, right? Because if you're looking at it from a distance and you're just using cards already, then you don't need like additional little tufts to come out of it, because that's going to be like the main geometry, right? But if you have something like this, it could be nice to have like a couple of tufts coming out of it, like here and there. It could look really good. So yeah, I love that that is incorporated in there already. That's awesome. So that would be like the, I guess the second step is adding more geometry, right? And then the third step that I would take is add like additional. Add like additional geometry, right? For like the little tufts, if you're gonna get up close. That's the way that I would approach it. Because, yeah, what is really important is that wherever you see the silhouette, right, that's where we want to spend like a little bit of extra attention. So for example, you could do the same thing here, right? Because this is not going to look good if you have it like that. So what you could do is have like a little cut here, right? So this would be like a cut in your geometry. And then you can start pushing and pulling like some of these sections out to actually make it feel like a little bit more organic, right? But that it doesn't feel, you basically want to remove all straight lines, right? Hey Tobias, good evening. How are you doing? Yeah, so that would be the way that I would approach it. Yeah. Stuff looks really nice though. The material renders by themselves. Like, if this stuff is gonna look as good in the engine, gonna be awesome. Yeah. So let's see. Also, welcome to any other feedback and thoughts. No, I think this is good, right? I think if you really pay attention, if you basically put this amount of attention to detail into all the rest of the assets, right? And like the rest of the materials and the rest of the geometry, like this is gonna be freaking awesome, right? So having like little sections where maybe like a stick comes out of it, right? Or like a stick comes out of it here, maybe a couple sticks, right? Just really, this is even stuff that you probably haven't had a chance to do so, right? Because you said that it's like pretty early, and that you've been focusing on the material, right? So I'm assuming that this is all gonna come in good time. But like, these details are gonna put you on track for a winner, right? So attention to details. I think the rope area needs to have some tension to it. The rope area. Yeah, so talking about this stuff, right? Where well, for example, these areas, where you have the feeling that the ropes are like binding these things together. Yep. That's a good point. And that can also be applied to like the rest of the areas too, right? That's a great point. That's awesome. All right, cool. Yeah, this stuff might even be easier if you just were to separate them out. Because then what you can do is once you have them separated, you can just start duplicating them in groups, right? So you can duplicate them easily, add like a couple of segments to it, like bend them in all kinds of different directions. And then this, like once it passes past this barrier, you just make it flat geometry again, right? Because you're basically going to do a transition from Geo to POM. And then this is going to be mainly POM as well. To then the last section here, like splaying out to become Geo again. Right? Because no one's really going to notice. Like if this is just like a flat tileable with some POM, if you then sell that it's not by focusing on the silhouette, right? So that's what I'm thinking. And the same can be applied here, right? If you just have like your tileable, but then the end sections, you just add like a couple of segments to it. Basically sell the effect, right? And then you can still emphasize the effect, right? So for example, if this is POM, you just pick like a section, like a strip, and you just like bend it over this guy here. Right, so that you have like one of the branches sticking out of like the tileable and just peeking over like this little section here. Mikita, thank you so much for the question. That's actually a very good one. What does POM stand for? POM stands for parallax occlusion mapping, and it's a way to fake more depth in your material. Let me see if I have like a quick example here. Like a quick comparison. Would actually be interesting to have some of this stuff handy. So this is an example from like buildings that I've been working on, right? But the core here, like the core material here, that's actually just like a flat tileable. There's no geometry whatsoever. But parallax occlusion mapping then makes it feel like it's coming out of it, right? Know what it is? Okay. Yeah, it's just always good to explain it for other people, right? Because sometimes we tend to use like very technical terms, so it's always good to have like a little bit of an explainer too. No, very cool stuff, Paula Maria. This is coming together really nicely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what is gonna come after this. Like what the next step is gonna be, right? Yeah. Good job so far, though. This is coming along awesomely. Next up. Thank you. No worries. Next up, we have Bodhi. Where are you, Bodhi? Hoverbike optimization. Would be great to get some feedback. Oh, I had to look through this, but there's no real questions, right? So I think for this one, we're gonna keep it pretty short. Because there's no specific questions, right? So what I'm seeing here, looking pretty good. Let's make sure. Yeah. I think this is something that we talked about last time, right? Separation of panels here. Because these are like two different panels. Could be really nice. And it also gives you like more leeway here to have like more interesting geometry. Right? That you can actually see the separation. Because right now, even though like you're selling this to me, like they are different panels, but we can clearly see that they're not, right? So what you could do at this point, if you want to sell the effect, focus on, again, the silhouette, right? It's sort of the same approach that we talked about with Paula, but this is just an approach on your hard surface object, right? So you could have like a little bit of a separation here. Had them separated, and I thought you meant I should make them as one. I did remember what we said last time, right? Let's have a look. Yeah, you're right. You are right though. Like I did say that last time. I'm just gonna say that it was like pretty dumb for me to say that. Like it kind of makes sense where you wanna optimize things, right? Like if this is gonna be like melted together basically, then that can be like one panel. But right now the edges don't make it look good in terms of like selling the effect that this is like a separate panel, right? So you kind of have to give us like an indication that they are separated, even though like this doesn't need to be like completely separated. If that's making sense. Yep. Sorry about that. I'm just gonna point out like a couple things, right? Like there's no texture layering. Like the front of this is just rust. It kind of makes it feel like very simplistic, right? Like there's no depth to the texturing. It's just rust. So it makes it feel like pretty uniform. Same for the main body as well. Like this doesn't feel like painted metal yet, right? Like we're not really seeing like any sort of layering that you would expect. Because this is what we're trying to sell, right? Is that this is like a hover bike, right? It's kind of like a scrappy kind of hover bike. So what I'm imagining is that this is gonna see like a lot of speed, right? But the front of the body is not really protected unless with like metal plates, right? So what actually would be really interesting to see is that we have like these directional scratches, right? That kind of follow along the chassis. Obviously with my paintbrush it's going to be like way too big. But this could be like an interesting addition. Because this would really sell the look of it being like a desert racer, right? Especially if we then look at this guy over here, right? You're telling a story of Scrappy and high speed, but we're not really seeing. We're seeing a little bit of Scrappy, right? But we're not really seeing anything of the high speed, right? So if we then have like these kind of scratches where you could really like overemphasize, right? That this is all just like scratched off. You could have like bare metal underneath, and then you could have the painted metal be like less affected once we get to this side, right? So we're seeing like a transition from very rusted or like bare metal into like painted metal. And then this is going to be very interesting for layering, right? Because if you have like, imagine like lots of stones and all that stuff like hitting these guys, then there's probably not gonna be too much damage here, right? So you're taking into account like the shape of the vehicle, and then also like the terrain that it's in and like how it's used, and then you're reflecting that in the way that you're texturing it too. Same here, right? If this is going at high speeds, the front of this protective barrier, like this protective, like, what is it? Like guarding mechanism, right? Or like bull bars or whatever they call them. Rust is probably not going to be affecting a lot of this stuff, right? Because it's constantly going to be like chipped off by like just stones flying past it. Yeah, and then again, it's a sandy area, right? So the internals are probably going to be caked up with like sand and mud and dirt and all that stuff. So like a quick little overview is embedding story and layering into your textures, right? And then a couple more things here. If you're taking close-up screenshots, which they look really nice, right? Just visually, they have like a lot of potential where you kind of have like a detail showcase. Make sure that they look really nice as well. Again, the paneling here, right? It feels like it's one piece, and it doesn't really feel right. So even having like, I don't know, like a piece of this panel like being chipped off, right? And then a piece of this panel so that we get, again, scrappy vibes, right? Maybe do like a cut in the geometry and have like a hole in the paneling here. Make it really feel scrappy. Focus on the details. And then also be careful about your geometry here as well. Oh, hello? Especially for close-up shots. Because you can kind of see like where the geometry is coming from, right? You can kind of tell, especially on the edge here. You can start counting polys. That's probably not what you want for like a zoomed in shot. One question, how would you add layer details to the rust when it's from a trim? To the rust when it's from a trim? The trim? I'm kind of wondering why this is a trim in the first place. Because I don't know how this is made up, right? I mean, how this is constructed. Um Because yeah, I remember last time we were looking at unique UVs, so I was assuming that you were gonna do it unique. So I don't know where the trim. Could be that we talked about it last time as well, but like I don't know where the trim would come in. Right? If you're doing everything unique. You thought I could be using a trim for it? With a rust? No. I don't think we would have said something like that. I mean, I can have a look at it again. But what we discussed was if you have like a trim sheet, right? Okay, so if you have a trim sheet, this is what we discussed last time. If you have a trim, do a second UV. That's what we said last time. So if you want to go that route, right? If you don't have like any more unique UV space, that's the way that you should go then. But that's something that we discussed last time, right? I use a trim for the rust and the engine under the panels, also for micro details. Yeah, it's Yeah, I see now why I said it. Because you already had everything packed anyway, right? I see. Yeah, if you want to continue building on that, you have to use like a second UV at this point. Or do some like vertex painting or something that gives you like the freedom there, right? Yeah, it's gonna be an interesting technical challenge to dive into. No, it's cool though. Good progression. I am liking what I'm seeing in terms of like the progress of it. You got a really solid base. There's some interesting things that are happening, right? Like this is pretty interesting. Stuff like this is getting pretty interesting. What I would be careful of is having stuff like this where it overlaps on both panels. What could be better is that you cut it off and have it affect like one panel here and then move this section to like over here or something. Because it always looks like a little bit weird when you have like two panels that like have just like it's almost a decal just stamped across two panels, right? I don't think that looks that good. Yeah. Gonna leave it there. Feel free for the next time to ask me specific questions as well. And we can dive into specifics of things. But thank you for putting up your work, Bodhi. And best of luck. And we're gonna jump to the apples. Love some feedback about my composition. At the moment, my main problem is that my frame works as a guideline to look at the back. The empty wall, but I don't really know what I can put there. Really don't know what to do, except that it would be pretty cool. Oh, okay, we're gonna just have a look at the composition then, right? First of all, I want to bring up something else actually. So the background, right? I know why you did it. And I think it has all the good components of why you wanted to do it, right? Like you want to add like more layering to your background. The only thing that's kind of happening right now is that it looks really fake. Like it doesn't really look like it makes sense. It just looks very chaotic. So I would say if you do something like that, like try to make it look like a street, but also potentially don't add too many layers, because right now we're almost looking at like a staircase, right? So we have like the staircase that goes up and up and up. And what could actually be more interesting is that you have... Nope. Like a volume here, maybe like another volume here, right? It can also be like just a chimney or whatever. And then maybe you have like a volume here. You know, something that kind of makes it feel more like a street and less chaotic. Or like less random. Because that's what it feels like at the moment. That's about the background, right? So you're currently thinking about, what do I need to do with this? Because you are right. You have like this triangular stuff that's happening. But you're getting led to like a wall here, right? I honestly wouldn't mind with your suggestion. Like if you just have like an arch. Let me actually have a look, because I have some like interesting let's see, some pictures from Croatia, if I can find them really quickly. But it's basically just like a hallway, but you can't really see the end of it. Let's see. Okay. Little Finch. It has so many cool hallways like this. So where you could have something like this, right? Just one example. But it's an arch that kind of leads you off into like another arch, but you can't really see the end of it, right? So it's not like a straight tunnel, because that always looks a bit whack. So you can have something that kind of leads you off and then goes into like a corner, or like or like a T junction or something like that, right? Something that has a little bit more interest to it, rather than just having like a straight hallway. But there's some really cool stuff that you can do with it. So this guy, for example, found like really interesting, like it's like a half arch, right? So you have the arch where it started, but then it probably led up to like a bigger arch, but then something got constructed in the way. So yeah, I would personally still add something there, you know? You know? Probably just gonna add this guy in here. Oh, it's not snipping though. I don't know why it's not doing anything. Let me just drag the picture in. Right, because it needs something, right? Like, and I think in your case, just having something there, well, not something, right? But like having a street there probably makes the most sense, right? Because then you could imagine that, oh, this is just like an arch that kind of goes into like another street. Where it then... What is it? Like something... Probably not the best. But like you're selling the fantasy that this is like a little section. that still continues on the opposite side, right? And then you could open up these streets, and all the streets kind of lead you to like the next section of the market, which could be really cool. And then maybe what you could do is add like more stalls in there, right? Maybe there's like a little stall that sells something else, you know? Maybe it has like a little canopy, like a shitty canopy that's set up. Because something needs to happen there, right? And I think the concern of having like a smiley face, right? Because that is a thing that you brought up right now with the two windows, it kind of looks like a smiley. No one cares. What you could do is remove this window here, right? That you could get rid of the smiley. Maybe you can do something more interesting with this framework, right? That it becomes part of a bigger wall that then leads you into this archway or something like that. You have the building blocks here, right? Like that's what I'm trying to say. Like you have building blocks that would allow you to just extend a wall section here. Like where you could have like another section. This is a piece of the wall. And then this is where the market continues, right? You don't have to show it, but like you could give the indication to people that that is where the market goes. And then you just have to build something around that, right? Be a little bit creative, right? Like with the pieces you have, split them apart, like push them inside of each other, see what works, and then you can still clean it up afterwards. That's the way that I would approach it. And then, yeah, you can do something really cool where you have this really nice flow going into like the same area, which would be really, really nice. Yeah, and then like remove the window potentially, right? The thing that's really important is that, well, this is what I'm trying to emphasize always, right? Is that if you see a problem, there's usually a creative solution for it. So you just saw me like kind of tinkering with the idea, right? Like I was like, okay, like it would make sense for it to continue because if you just have a dead end, that doesn't look good at all. So cool, we'll have it continue. If the arch itself looks really weird, then doing something around the arch to not make it look as weird as it once did, and like kind of making it like more built up with like a timber frame around it or something like that, right? Could be really interesting. Like really interesting. But yeah, it's up to you to kind of play around with it, right? But yeah, all I'm trying to say here is that if it then still looks like a smiley, right? Cool, that's the next step. And then we look at like what we can do to fix that, right? Removing the window, that's easy. Maybe changing the building a little bit, you know? We have options there. So what I will say here is play around, right? Experiment with things. And if it doesn't work out, what you could always do is work on a layer, right? You just have it on a layer, you play around. If it doesn't work, toggle layer on and off. Doesn't really work. Okay, let's try something else and just delete the layer. I'll let you in on a secret, which is probably not something that a lot of people do, or like, it's probably not even advised. Let me be honest. But when I feel like I'm running into like a creative problem that I can't really fix, what I'll do is I'll nuke my scene and then start from scratch. Sounds like really drastic, right? But sometimes I run into an issue that I'm like, look, this doesn't feel good. Like, this doesn't feel like what I wanted it to be yet. And I can try and put like band-aids on top of it. But if the band-aids don't work, and if I tried like a bunch of band-aids, then what do I do? Sometimes the only option there is just to start a new level, you know? And build it up from there. And usually it will turn out way better. I'm not saying that you have to do that here, right? Because this is like an easy fix. This is like a band-aid situation, not like a nuke your scene situation. Let me be clear. But I just want to throw it out there that I do that occasionally. Yeah. Cool. I hope that helped, the apples. This is coming along splendidly, though. I like the pace. I like the visuals. I like what you're doing with the scene. So keep on pushing it. Keep on pushing it. And next up, we have Mikval. I think this is going to be a quick one because you came up with some really interesting proposals already, right? Because we'll have some feedback on how to present it towards the end, right? Just came back now. I'm gonna look at what you said. Thanks a lot. No worries. But yeah, the presentation here, like it honestly, like you're already doing, like it only needs to be like, I'll be honest, it doesn't even need to be like this sort of, what is it, like pedestal or like holder underneath it. Like it could really easily just be like the fabric underneath it with like all the folds on it and then have the sword on top of it. That's it. But if you want to include this into it, that's good. You don't need to make like the whole background. I like the way that you're thinking about it. I think this could be like very effective, you know? A very effective way of presenting your work. I'll bring up an example, right? Like good buddy Will. I bring this up as an example because I just like the way that he did that with one of his guns that he made, right? It's a tiny thing, but it works wonders, right? If you just look at this, it's a piece of fabric underneath it, and then the rest of the models were, or like the rest of the assets, was stuff that he already had modeled anyway. So, a very simple solution, and I think let me check. Use Marvelous. Yeah, you can use Marvelous for this, right? So he made the cloth underneath himself, I think. But you don't need to. You could just use like a Megascan texture or something like that, and then just throw it on a plane that has been simulated on top of what you have here, right? So yeah, I don't really have anything more to add. I think this is like, honestly, with the presentation wise, like a very good idea. So I would just go for it. So like the table and the cloth thing, it's like the table and the cloth, but not the holder in the background. Yeah, that's the way that I would approach it. Like, I would honestly, if you're looking for something more of a background, right? If that's really what you want to do, if you really want to push it that far, what you could do is just have a statue. Just a random statue, right? Because let's assume that this is all you're going to be seeing. Right? Like, the statue might come into play here. You're not even going to see the hands. You know? Like, you don't need like a sculpted, like uniquely made statue for that. You could just have a statue that kind of has like a pose like that. If you find like a free one online, Sketchfab or Megascans, whatever outlet has it lying around, basically, right? Because also you need to think about the presentation if you're gonna apply some depth of field to it. Like the statue is gonna be slightly blurred out anyway, so no one's gonna notice. It just needs to work for you color-wise and like noise-wise, right? That's all the stuff you're trying to, all the things you're trying to do. Also, let me make sure that we have a look at everything, right? Yeah, this thing is kind of like the perfect example, right? So like the ref that you shared, this is just like a bunch of generic folds on a statue. So these could be like, you could use like a base model that has a pose already and then just do like a bunch of sculpting on it. Do like a quick bake, quickly texture it. Like a very, very quick thing, right? And what you could also do, depending on how far you want to go with this, right? I'm just giving you all the options and you decide which ones to pick, right? Or like, I'm not giving you all the options, but like a bunch of options. So for example, what I would do, what I would think about is, do I really need to sculpt like the tablet that it's on? Because if you really think about it, what you could do is make the cloth just a little bit bigger so that it drapes over all the edges and then you don't need to do anything with the geometry underneath it. You can just leave it like basically like a blank model that has like this satin piece of cloth on top of it. Right? Because it's covering up like all the edges anyway. And then you don't need to sculpt like a stone tablet that's underneath it that you can only see from like a couple of edges. It depends. It all depends on you, right? Like these are not, like you don't have to do all this stuff. You decide how far you push it. But if you really think about it, the focus is on the broken sword and then maybe on the cloth. But the rest of it is all like tertiary and like background information, because no one's gonna ask you to see like a breakdown of a piece of stone underneath the cloth that they can't see. That makes sense. I wanted to focus on the sword, so I think I keep it simple with cloth and then maybe something simple underneath. Yep. All you need. It's all you need. No worries. Next up, we got Tate. Tate Bitters. Where is Tate? There you are. See, there was a question in here. I mean, it's all kind of jumbled up. So, does anything look out of place? Any spaces that I could draw out more so than the props? Any additional feedback is welcome. Was also wondering which lighting scenario is stronger than the daytime or the nighttime. So we have both of them here, right? Like daytime is underneath, and then we got nighttime up here. For me personally, well, depends if you want to see it, right? I don't think it's personal, but I like the nighttime more, just because we don't have a light that distracts us from looking at something at the edge of the frame. Whereas with this one, like the focus is clearly on the main models, right? But with this one, we kind of have like two bright spots in our image. So that's why I like this one more. Just because all the attention is focused here and it's not divided by anything else. That would be my 2 cents. The rest of it looks really good though. do have to say. Like, you do have a knack for texturing and showing it all off and, yeah, paying attention to all the details. So this is freaking awesome. It's a real, yeah, it's just a real nice piece to look at, you know? Just real nice. I honestly don't really have too much to say about, like, it's like a pretty straightforward piece when it comes to the composition, right? Which I don't think is bad, right? I'm a fan of like pretty straightforward compositions when it comes to stuff like this, because you want people to see the assets, right? And I think you 100% achieved that here. Then when it comes to the lighting, I don't really have too much to add, honestly. I think you did a great job. I like that we still have like some additional light, right? But it doesn't distract from the main focal point here. Which is really nice. When it comes to this one, it gets a little bit more distracting, right? So my personal favorite here will be the night one. No. It's looking good. Looking very good. Okay, if we're gonna be paying attention to the details, right? The wheels also be wet. Leonardo is saying you could put in a dirty window made with bottle's bottom cap. Just to lower the light intensity that they seen. Yeah, you could also just have like a really old, like dirty window, right? Like one of those like yellow, really dirty windows. But then what you're doing is you're not really adding like any variation between the scenes, right? Because it is a good suggestion, right? But like if the way that I then look at it is if we're gonna push them closer to each other, then why not take the night scene anyway? Right? Because then what we're doing is, yeah, we're just pushing the two scenes closer together, right? They don't have like a massive difference. I think if you wanted to do something like that, Leonardo, well, it's not really specific about like your feedback, right? But if you wanted to push them closer, or like further apart, like you would need to drastically change that. For example, the daylight only has natural light coming in, only, right? And then the night one has the light bulb, right? Like the light bulb lighting, and doing something completely different. That could be interesting. So maybe if you do that and then also apply what you just said, right? Like have a dirty window, that could be interesting. And there's also other ways, right? Like you could, I mean, there's so many solutions here, right? Like you could push like a small bush in front of it, right? To like make it less interesting. Or you could put like some stuff on the shelf that kind of blocks the sunlight coming in, or whatever, right? So it's a good suggestion. Because I know that I keep hammering down suggestions when they come up, but it's a very good suggestion there. I just want to say that. No, this is good. I don't really have anything else to say, Tate. So the only thing that I could put out was like the wet wheels, and maybe, okay, maybe it's not too bad actually. I was gonna say maybe like a little bit more distance from the frame. Yeah, I got it. But yeah, that's honestly like the most that I can say about this. Like the execution is really well done. I like how it's coming out. I like the attention to details. Very nicely done. Great job, Tate. You got a good eye for detail, man. Keep it up. All right. Next up, we got Mikita. Mikita is new as well. Welcome so much. Well, 20 days that you've been in the community. So thank you so much for being here. Don't know if this is your first Whip Wednesday, but welcome. A lot of things are still whip, so I'll ask about lighting and some other specific things. Okay, so let's make sure got things set up here. Okay, so number one is lighting. What was the lighting in relation to the concept? Right? Gonna make some notes here. Influenced both by the lighting and the wood tone and the glossiness, so I wonder if the wood material on the walls makes the rest of the room feel too reddish. Saturated. Okay, so you're thinking about like your material's influence on the lighting as well, right? So number two is material influence on lighting. Let's actually tackle these one by one. So lighting versus the concept. What is really interesting about the concept, and this is probably the one thing that you've already noticed, right? Because you're bringing up the reddish tones inside of your environment currently, and that you might feel that it's too red. The interesting thing in the concept is that you can clearly see that there is like a contrast going on between the two, right? So we have like the exterior, which is like blue, pink and purple, right? And then the interior is red, orange, etc. So we can kind of see like there's like a differentiation between the inner part and then the exterior, right? So we kind of need to find a way that we can put that into our environment too. I'm gonna kind of have a look. Right, so a couple of opportunities here, right? We have a door. The door could be perfect to have like the room next to it, which has like a, let's imagine that it has like a bunch of windows, right? But it has no artificial light. So we get like a blue glow that comes in. Blue light coming from here. Then also, what I think could be really interesting, the way that I'm imagining this room, right, is that we have windows. That's the way that I imagine the room. So that could be like a really interesting way to add, again, external blue light coming into the scene, right? And if you're gonna, the best part about this is that if you're gonna do it the same way that they kind of have it in the concept, right? If you're not really gonna have like additional screenshots or viewpoints, you don't even have to model the windows. You could just have them as like blue rectangular lights coming into the scene. Because that's the thing that's missing here, right? Some sort of contrast between blue and orange. Like that's always really interesting to look at. So take that into account when you're trying to do like the next pass, right? Or when you're doing the next pass, I should say. That could be like very interesting. Then let's go to the next question, right? So I think that's the biggest thing that I can see that is deviating from the concept, is that you don't really have that interesting contradiction happening in your light. The color contrast is missing. And then the second part was your material, right? And how that influences the lighting as well. I think it honestly could be really interesting to try to already like put more bluish tones inside of your textures as well. For example, this is something that I also spotted on here, which is kind of, they have like the red frame. Right, so the frame has like a lot of red tints to it. And then you have the, well, I guess they're both frames. But then you have like a secondary frame. So number one is red. And number two is, it is still red, but because of the ornaments and like the worn nature of the wood, it's kind of becoming more desaturated, right? So let's call it red-ish. Right? And then the third layer, which is like the interior part, is like well-worn wood, and it does feel to me that it has more like a grayish kind of tone. It still has like, it still leans towards the red, right? But it also feels like it's infused with like a little bit more blue tones, and it becomes way less saturated because of it. Whereas if we look at your wood, it doesn't really have that sort of layering to it. Which is, like you said, right? Like it's very important in Lumen, especially, to look at your base colors. And especially even if it wasn't Lumen, right? If you just have like a brown environment with orange lights, like you're never gonna get like something really interesting happening because there's no contrasting or complementary colors there. So trying to infuse that a little bit more, where you could have 3 different material instances, right? So the frame itself would be one material instance, and then the closer you go to the core, the more desaturated it gets, right? So that you could already build that into it. Like you kind of the way that I'm looking at it is like a gradient, right? So that you have like the brighter frames, or like the more saturated frames, like number 1 to like desaturated to 3. That's sort of the way that I look at it. But yeah, material influence is more important than ever, especially with Lumen. So definitely pay attention to that. Oh, sorry, Leonardo. You said something. Oh, but it's not showing up in the actual chat anymore. Oh, okay. So the light scattering inside the woods, maybe with time and dust can become more faded. Yeah, and there's more than one way that you could approach this as well, right? You could have like a gradient going from the bottom to the top as well, which then adds, and I'm talking just like a black and white gradient, right? Like overlaid on top of it, so that the bottom of it is gonna be more darkened compared to the top. Like it's a very, I wouldn't say it's very common, but like that's something that is, you might be surprised like how big of a difference that makes into how embedded it looks into its environment. Could be very interesting to play around with that too. Well, let's see if we have some other questions as well. Do the fibers on the walls wood look realistic in terms of scale and pattern? Yeah. I think the main thing you have to be careful of, I think it looks realistic, right? But there's this weird thing that happens when we make something look like realistic. Like sometimes it doesn't work in like a video game setting, or like in our case, like an environment art setting, right? Because you get like interesting stuff happening when you get close by. But then as soon as you're this distance, like it just becomes noisy, right? So to that effect, I would probably try and potentially scale it up a little bit and see if that is better or worse, right? It's something that you have to decide for yourself whether you want to go with it or not. So the scale of wood grain. Can be turned up. And then number 4. I'll be iterating on the Angel's texture since it looks too procedural. I'm not content with the current look. Do you have any tips on that? So, yeah, it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier with some other people in the chat today, right? Or like in the live stream. Is when you wanna make something look really good, you have to look at it through like a storytelling lens and like a layering lens, right? What I mean by that, just in your example, right? Where is it? Oh, and also something that I keep forgetting is plus references, right? Because probably like an easy one of the easy things to apply is, okay, where is it going to be dusty? Right? Like, it's probably an easy thing to apply that because it's probably going to be the spaces that are going to be hidden, right? And like the tops of spaces where people can't clean. So we're probably going to have like something like this happen, right? You could have like the top of the nose as well because that's sticking out. Probably going to be like lots of dirt buildup here as well. Right? So that would be dirt. But also you have to look at it from like a very specific way, right? Because I do agree with you that it looks very generic because you have like this random noise on top of it. I wouldn't do that, but if you, well, I would do it, but it has to be like super subtle. Like it has to be so subtle that you don't notice it unless you're looking at it for like a long time, right? Because with textures, what is really interesting is that you have the believability comes from the amount of layers that you add on top of each other, right? For example, we can actually have a look at Tate's work here, right? Because he does a fantastic job when it comes to like the actual layering of the textures. If we just have a look at what's happening here, right? It's so we got, let's focus just on this section, right? Just on this little thing here. So there's base metal. Then probably thinking about like some dents, right? Because this is probably used a ton of times. And there's gonna be like little scratches and like little bits of dirt. Well, wait, let's do this in like order. So base metal. There's a middle variation, right? Probably like a couple of layers. And this is literally just like taking the base metal and like just slightly skewing like the saturation or the hue or whatever to slightly make it different, right? So that you get there, you can see some noise, but it's not distracting, right? And then once you set up like these couple of layers, you don't use the same mask, right? Like you have a mask that is, it probably starts out with like a generator first, right? Just to get like some noise on there, or like a triplanar projected mask or something like that, something to get you started. And then you add layers on top of it, right? Maybe you take out the ambient occlusion, and then maybe on top of that you start painting some sections out. And then you do that on every layer that you build on top of it, and then after a certain while you get something that is like very strategically built up and has like all the subtlety that you would expect from something in real life. So yeah, got base metal, metal variation. There's some white spots on there. There's also some rusty spots, right? Or like, but it's very subtle, right? What I mean with rusty spots is just like these couple of things. And then the white spots are like these little scratches that you see appearing. Kind of looks like a bird that got knocked out or something. You can see that like the layering is very subtle, right? Just wanted to use that work here, Tate, to give good example. That's the way that I would approach it. So yeah, storytelling, thinking about it logically, looking at references, and then being very subtle. Very subtle build-up. Hey, Antonio! Got it. Also, Mikita. Maybe I should be darker. And then the last one here is any general feedback on that one picture of the grandfather's clock? Or do you need more pictures? Yeah, this is interesting. Okay, no, I'll give like a little bit of feedback on it. Like some quick things that I can see, right? Is... Okay. I'm gonna ask a question, right? I'm gonna ask one question. And that is, I think, gonna address like majority of the stuff that I'm seeing here. Like, how was this built? It's a super interesting question that you can apply to like a wide-ranging like assortments of assets or even environments, right? Once you start looking at how something is built and how something is constructed, then you can see like, oh, okay, it's probably not going to be like one solid piece of metal, right? So what's going to happen is we're going to have like a little separation here, little separation here. This is probably going to be like a separate piece as well. I'm just doing this from the top of my head, right? I don't know if this is accurate. But then we have these things here. That's probably going to be built out of separate pieces, right? That might be like a good joint. Maybe let's do a split here. Right? And then what's going to happen is that every little section of wood is going to have like a different directionality to it. And this might sound stupid, right? But this sort of stuff like really makes an asset believable. So the directionality is this goes up, this goes to the side. Let's say this goes to the side as well. This goes to the side. This goes up. This goes to the side. This goes that way. Right? Depending on how this is split up, right? And then you can start adding like different variations in like how the grain is going to be rotated, right? So for example, if you know that like neighboring islands, right? Let's call them islands for now, are all gonna go up. And then it would be really interesting to have the other thing going inside of like a different direction if you can, right? So for example, this one goes up here, but then this wooden paneling goes that direction. Right? And then if you start applying like this sort of attention to detail, you're probably going to notice like a bunch of areas that this can be applied on, right? Because this is going to have like a connecting piece. Right? And this... Okay, so we have like the rings here. I'm just going to bring that up. Yeah. But there's like one question, right? Like, how was this built? And once you start digging into that question, like a whole new world is gonna go open for you. And that's honestly what's gonna separate you from like a lot of other people out there, right? Because showing attention to detail, like showing that you really did due diligence when it comes to like, okay, how and where are the seams gonna be? What kind of seams are there? Like, how would they make certain elements, right? Is it glued on or is it like nailed in? Like all that kind of stuff. Super interesting. So yeah, think about that. And then also, if you then apply the same sort of thinking that we've been talking about when it comes to the texturing, I think this prop is gonna go from something that already looks good, right? Don't get me wrong. Like, I can see that you put time and effort into this, and you have like more damage on the edges and all that kind of stuff. So I know that you're putting in time and effort. It shows, right? But it's gonna put it to like a whole new level. And then if you apply that sort of thinking, or like that sort of approach to the assets, I want to be really careful here, right? Like, if you apply that sort of thinking to the assets that are going to be most important in your scene, you're going to have a winner on your hands, right? Because I do want to emphasize, not everything needs to be built unique. I'm not sure. Let me actually look at your post. Oh, there's some really interesting iterations when it comes to your response from your materials, especially, right? Yeah, interesting. Because I kind of like. I kind of like the way that it responded, like in the first section when you get the wood in, you know, where we can really see like the roughness variation. Like a very interesting screenshot. Yeah. Let's see. Any general feedback on the one picture? Oh, No, I think the rest of it is looking pretty good though. What I would suggest. Let me ask you a question. Right? Like, are you using trim sheets in this environment? I mean, let me think. So you could. Yeah. There's opportunity to use like a trim sheet here. Yes. Okay. Cool. That's good. That is good. No, that's great. That's why I was also so specific when it came to if you put the time and effort into the props that matter, right? Because I wanna let everyone know here that not everything in your scene doesn't have to look like it is like the best thing that you've ever produced, right? For example, if we look at the concept here, you're gonna probably have like a lot of focus around this desk here and this desk here, right? And it also has like a bunch of unique stuff, right? The rest of it, I would try to cut corners wherever I could, reusing as much as I can, um, making atlases, using trim sheets, yeah, just really trying to cut corners wherever I can while still making it look okay, right? But like those two things here, like those two desks, are probably going to be the focal point of this environment. So I would put, if I were to put in like unique details or unique assets, that's where I would spend my time. Yep. Okay. Nice one, Makita. Yeah, like I said, this is a very challenging project, right? But I'm sure that you're learning a lot when it comes to workflows to use, like how to approach it, like all that kind of stuff. Thanks a ton for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Yeah, no worries. Happy to help. And if you got more questions, feel free to tag it for Whip Wednesday again for next week. Be happy to have a look. Oh, what's happening? Let me go. I truly am learning a lot. Yeah. It shows. It shows. Like this is really like a push yourself project, right? So best of luck, Mikita. Like I said, if you have any questions, you can also just ask the community as well, right? It doesn't have to be dependent on like Whip Wednesday or something like that. Yeah. Let's have a look. Jacob. Jacob is still blocking things out. I'm just reading through the text here. Any thoughts on the composition or concept would be great. My next steps are going to be swapping out the temporary geo, adding details to the skyscraper kit, and a few rough props that are going to be modeled. Oh, have a great evening, Makita. Thanks for joining. And yeah, I'm doing good, Antonio. How are you doing? I honestly love this little block out here, Jacob. Looks really interesting. One thing that I will say, even in its like preliminary state, right, is you gotta be careful, or something that I would be cautious about, is the amount of noise that you have in the environment right now. So obviously this is going to be block out, right? So I'm doing like a fair bit of projection as well. Like I'm imagining what this is going to be. And I'm assuming that this is going to be like lots of foliage. Right? So the foliage, I don't know. The foliage might also be like coming on top of the roof as well. And then we have like these like hexagonal patterns on the floor. And the hexagonal patterns here as well. What I would be really careful of is probably I would cut out like the hexagonal patterns, especially on the floor, right? So that the floor remains as like an area of rest, maybe with like smaller details, right? Like maybe little leaves or like little bits of stuff on the floor, but not something that takes away from not something that takes away from the actual stuff that you want to be looking at, right? So for example, I can imagine that there's going to be like a ton of cool stuff that we could potentially see in here, right? Or even in this little area where you have like workbenches and all that kind of stuff set up, right? All I'm trying to say is that you want the focus to go to the sections that you've set up here. And for them to stand out more, you kind of want to reduce like the amount of noise that you have on the floor in comparison to those two focal areas, right? So what I said of removing the floor pieces, that's a drastic measure, right? You can also, what you could also do is say, look, no, I'm going to keep the floor pieces, but what I will do is make sure that the texturing and the materials, that they kind of blend in with like the standard concrete that's underneath. So if you have like gray on gray, right, even if it's like a little bit different, that would also be a way of reducing like the visual noise that would bring to the table, right? That would also be an option. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, the rest of it I do really like though. Even though it's block out, right? Like, it's a really nice block out. You have some like really interesting connecting pieces. You can do a lot of cool stuff with this, right? You can start adding like really cool bits of assets or whatever. Like these cables, you know, like you can hang stuff from it. if you wanted to. Right? It depends on what you want to do. Right? You don't want to obscure the whole thing, obviously, but so all I'm saying is that you have like a lot of flexibility with this scene. And that you can add like a bunch of really cool like tiny things into it. So yeah. Just keeping in mind the noise versus rest ratio, right? There are a lot of people say this is like a general rule for like a lot of stuff, right? Like 80 versus 20, right? Where like 80% like rest and then 20% noise like feels really good. But you're an artist, right? Like just play around with stuff. If it gets too noisy after a certain while, like just move stuff around. Have fun with it. Yeah. No, other than this, cool little block out, man. I like what I'm seeing here. Very interesting colors as well. I like that you kind of have like the blue area and then like the green area. You could potentially, this is more like an idea, right? This is not necessarily feedback, but you could potentially play around with that, where you have like the blue, the green for the gardens, the orange for the working area or the living space, and then yeah, I guess like the algae vats are gonna be green as well, so I guess you can't do too much with that. Yeah. Maybe well, that just sounds like an idea, right? Like more colors. So maybe you could have like an orange area or like a purple area. I don't know. Something to think about. Cool stuff though. I like it. McFarlane's asking a question as well. I had a different question if you got time. How many posts should I have as a minimum on my portfolio when applying for jobs? There's no minimum. It's a question that I get a lot, but there's no minimum. There's no maximum. The stuff that you have on your portfolio just needs to be the best stuff that you can put out there. And if that is the case, like if you have 3, or if you have 1, or if you have 16, it's about quality, right? Not the amount of it. Like, there's no such thing. Like, okay, so I'll say like the only reason why like quantity matters is because they want to see if you can be consistent, right? So, for example, people that get in with 1 portfolio piece, that is a risky move. Because what you're doing is you're putting all your eggs in one basket. And if that one environment isn't like up to industry standards almost, right? Then it's going to be very hard to convince them. Because imagine if you have a portfolio pieces of less quality, right? Like slightly less quality, but you have 2 of them. Then at least you're showing like, hey, this is a person that can reliably like put out content, right? Like within a given time frame. That's the only reason why it would matter. Because even in the case where like, let's say person X pumps out or like has just 1 piece in their environment, but that environment is good enough to convince them. Yeah, that can also work. But yeah, there's no minimum. There's no bar, you know? This is the whole weird thing about applying for a job, right? Like I have pushed people to start applying for a job and then they were surprised that they got one. But it's also not really someone else's place entirely to say whenever you're ready or not. Sometimes you just have to figure this stuff out yourself, I feel. where if you apply for jobs and you keep working on your stuff and then you just keep things going, right? Don't put your eggs in one basket. You just, once you have like a couple of pieces that you think are like, cool, these are like good, right? Just start applying and then keep working on stuff. Okay, last one for tonight. We got Brandoom. Brandoom, where is your post? Here we go. Understand. Thanks so much for the answer. No worries. I added a gray paint layer because it seemed more like this in the concept. Any tips on the wear and tear would be much appreciated. I photo bashed some images on the tiny motherboard, so I'll be tackling that. It honestly is hard to tell. Like your idea of color coding the areas could help with readability. Thanks for taking a look. Yeah, no worries, Jacob. Thank you so much for posting it as well. Okay, Brandoom. It's sort of hard to give feedback because I don't. There seems to be. I mean, it looks better than last time, right? Quick look. You definitely put some more work into it, but sometimes it's just really difficult to give feedback on it. Let me give it a try. And why I say that is because there is so much happening, right? That if you say some feedback on the texturing front, I don't even know like what changed compared to last week. Obviously, like the main front panel, right? Like the gray one, definitely changed. Because that was like bare metal before, so that's really cool. I like what you did there. But there's point some stuff out, right? So I'll add a couple of question marks to kind of indicate like what is happening with those things, right? Because I don't really know. Like they kind of feel off. These lights. This area feels like way too clean in comparison. I think that's the thing that I'm struggling with, right? Like you have areas that are like really damaged and like really dirty, but there's also like the contrasting elements that are like still, I'm assuming still block out, right? Like these areas, for example, in comparison, right? That's also why it's so hard, because I don't know which element you're still working on, so I feel like we're just rethreading ground, right? Because I feel like maybe last time we've also talked about these elements, for example. Which is fine, right? I know you're working on some other stuff, but it makes it really difficult to know what you already have done and what's not. So maybe what I could suggest is do a pass on the whole thing first, where all the texturing is like consistent and to like a certain level, right? Whatever that level is that you said. And then we can have a look at like the whole thing as like a completed step. I'm not saying that it needs to be finished, right? But I just don't want to I just don't want to keep saying things that you're already aware of, right? I've still got some areas to really work on. Yeah. So I would say let's do this. Let's table this for now. Keep working on what you're doing here, right? Because let me quickly check again from last week. Stuff is getting worked on, right? For sure. And you're adding details to it. I noticed like the stuff that you added on here as well. So you are doing a good job and you're making improvements. But let's get it to like a consistent level and then have a look at it again. And then we can really break it down and I can really like look at it in like stages, right? That sounds great. Just thought I'd throw it in to stay consistent and make sure the paint isn't weird. Oh, the paint isn't weird? No, I don't think so, actually. Yeah. I think the only thing that I could say about the paint, right, is that it kind of feels like it's not really flaky. It's gonna sound silly, but it almost feels like it's more like a ripped wallpaper now. Does that make sense? Because it kind of has like the what is it, like the rips in it, where you have like the folds coming up, right? Which is also something that happens on paint, but you would probably see that more on plaster rather than metal. Let's actually make sure that that's the case. Metal paint. I mean, it's an extreme example, but yeah, you can kind of tell this is also like really rusty as well. You can kind of have that peeling. Right, well, probably this is not really a good example. Because you kind of want something... I don't think you really necessarily want to go for peeling. Actually share what I'm looking at here. Yeah, you would almost want to see something more like this, right? Where it's kind of flaky. Kind of has like a bunch of flakes on it. I mean, it's up to you, right? Like you decide what kind of response you're gonna get, right? Like if you, there's probably gonna be pictures out there that will show you what damaged paint on bare metal actually looks like, right? Because the way that you could also approach it is, I think on metals, and I'm trying to think back, like when I did like some like small modeling with my dad. Leonardo is saying something. Those pieces are not painted. Internal stock is millimetric. Paint thickness variation may not assemble well. Need to research a lot and be nerdy about it. Yeah, they're sprayed, aren't they? I don't even know. Will be, yeah, this would be a good thing to research, honestly, because what I assumed, oh no, like when I painted like little toy models that were metal, you didn't have to prime them. Let's stop yapping and actually look at some reference, right? Because this is the thing. Like even I'm not sure, right? Like how this would look. I just know that it doesn't look correct. Like some areas, they kind of have something going for them, right? But I think with certain areas like this, like it kind of feels like a little bit weird, right? Especially because nothing's really gonna touch it there. But yeah. So let's table this for now. And in the meantime, just ask, feel free to ask questions, right? And if you want to tag me in questions, that would be fine too. If you're really stuck with something, right? Yeah. Like I said before, ambitious project, but keep it up, buddy. I'm curious to see where this is gonna go. Stuff that you added on there already is looking really nice, so best of luck. Yeah, I've got stuff outside with a painted layer chip in a way, but they don't unfold like what I've got. Oh, that is the best reference, man. Like stuff that you have just lying around that is doing the exact same thing that you want to replicate. That's the best sort of reference. Go grab that shit, put it on your desk. Whatever it is. Well, maybe not if it's a tractor or something like that, you know? If it is portable, put it on your desk. Thanks, always appreciate it. No worries. No worries. Okay. Oh, 2 hours. On the spot. Yeah, a dolly. Oh, okay. Yeah. Maybe maybe not that carryable, right? 2 hours on the dot. I want to say big shout out to the people that keep asking for questions, keep asking for feedback. Thank you all so much for participating. This was awesome. For the people that don't participate, always feel free to put like the work in progress tag, like the Whip Wednesday tag on it, so I can have a look at it. And just for the people that are just doing their own thing, it's awesome to see your work too. So keep posting on there, and yeah, just really looking forward to whatever's gonna make. Because I know, again, I'll say this probably every stream, but I know that I go hard into the feedback, right? But I genuinely, like, I'm really interested in what everyone is making. So yeah, so excited for you all. Keep up the good work, and we'll see you next week. Have a nice evening, people. Bye-bye.